Okay.
Hi, Guerry. Welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited to have you on today to talk about sunscreen, which seems so small, but really it's an important topic. A couple weeks ago, I had someone on the podcast, Stephanie Lacuna, and we were talking about toxin-free living, and sunscreen came up because it's really, I have two redheads in my house, my husband and our son Keegan, and they're very fair-skinned, and my husband's prone to skin cancer, and they're both prone to burning, and so this is like a really big, important topic in our house. And then I met you, and you were sharing all about your awesome sunscreen, so I can't wait to ask you all about it. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's great. Yeah, your son and your husband definitely need our stuff.
Well, we did receive some in the mail, and so it is in our house, ready to be used. So I'm excited.
Good.
So tell everyone a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What's your history? Obviously, you are a patent agent. Is that correct?
That's true. I'm not an attorney. I'm not an attorney. I'm a PhD chemical engineer.
Wow. Okay. So from that to sunscreen, give me your story. Share your journey with us.
So really, one didn't have that much to do with the other, except I did patent everything I did for the sunscreen because I do patent work for a living.
There you go. That's important.
Sorry.
That's an important step.
It is very. And if you do what I do, then if you don't patent it, then you've told a lot of people how to patent things. You don't even patent your own stuff. That's not good.
Yeah.
So what I did was I surf as well.
Okay.
And the story started out because there were two really young guys. One guy that I started surfing with 20 years ago, he was in his early 20s. And he was probably more prone than even your husband and your son regarding melanoma skin cancer. In fact, he got it. He's 21 years old, blonde hair, blue-eyed kid, very, very light skin, almost albino. And he contracted melanoma, and his dermatologist said, Paul, you can keep surfing if you want to, but you're going to get it again. And so he stopped surfing. And I thought, this is insane. There's got to be a way to prevent people from getting melanoma that are surfing. And of course, in surf, if you have to do any outdoor water sports, as you probably know, you're going to get a double dose of it because of the reflection from the water, right? And especially in areas where we live, down in North Carolina, Virginia area, it's intense. And then I've been down to Costa Rica a few times, and it's even more intense. And the people there are very scared, the surfers especially. So I said, well, I got to develop something that's better and different and works. And so I did. It took about 6 years after I filed the first patent application to actually make the product.
Wow.
Yeah. So
you put it out into the world, and then it happened.
Yes. I think the thing is the world still doesn't know, but maybe thanks to the podcast they'll know more. But the world still doesn't know about the product really, because my full-time job. This was a hobby that's become a business. It was born out of the need to solve a problem, and I do product development work as well as patent work. So I solve problems for a living. That's what I do, and get people patents too. But usually when you solve a problem, especially a problem that might make money, it's probably patentable. So I do all of that,
awesome.
And been doing that for a long time, like 25 years now.
So it just sort of fit right in. You saw a need, you had the skill set. You made it happen.
Right. Yeah, and I was pretty naive about it. I thought, I'll just file a patent application, and then I'll sell the rights to the patent to, Coppertone or Banana Boat or Neutrogena or somebody, right? But no. I started making it in the garage, and I started making it for my family and my friends. And that was, 2002. And here it is 16 years later, and I'm making it for more than just family and friends now. But
wow.
I still make it myself, but not in my garage.
Sure.
Because it's FDA approved, and it has to be made in an OTC facility, and it has to meet FDA requirements, and that's very expensive and time consuming. And that was part of the journey, is learning about that, understanding what the requirements were. I also am a professor at Duke, and I work with Global 500 companies. So from my perspective, I couldn't afford to get a warning letter from the FDA saying, hey, pal, you're not doing this right, or you're violating some of the regs. And it's a long story, but there are a lot of people who aren't doing that. And that's part of the problem in the industry, but there's a lot of problems in the industry.
Well, that's a good segue. Let's talk about that. So what's the problem with regular sunscreen? Like, what is the issue? Why should people be concerned about just grabbing the regular sunscreen at Walmart?
Yeah, good question. Great question. So, well, I think the thing is, the way I started out is I developed a non-endocrine disrupting, cytoprotective, immuno-enhancing sunscreen. So that's a mouthful. So I'll start with the first one, non-endocrine disrupting. So we've heard about endocrine disruptors, female mimicking hormones. Female mimicking hormones, the biggest one on the planet is the pill. It's in the air, it's in the water, and it's disrupting basically the gender differences between male and female gets disrupted with female mimicking hormones, or male mimicking hormones for that matter. There's just a lot more female mimicking hormones than there are males for a lot of reasons, mostly because the female mimicking hormones occur in nature as well. Mm-hmm. Even shea butter has female mimicking hormones.
Phytoestrogens and things like that. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, for men, that's really, really bad. But for women, it's not so good either, because it leads to prostate cancer, breast cancer, those kinds of things. Basically, what endocrine disruptors do is they disrupt your endocrine system. Your endocrine system is what gets rid of toxins. So if your endocrine system gets disrupted, you're not peeing the way you normally do. You're not perspiring the way you normally do. And now think about if you were lathering yourself with stuff to protect your skin, your body's biggest organ, from getting damaged. And while you're doing that, you're putting this stuff on that might disrupt the flow of urine or the flow of perspiration out of your body, which carries with it toxins. So if you do that, if you're using sunscreens that have endocrine disruptors in them, which are the organic sunscreens, things like methoxycinnamate, avobenzone, oxybenzone, all of the benzoates, they're female mimicking hormones. They're proven to be. There was an article by Margaret Schlumpf. She was a toxicologist at the University of Zurich in Switzerland, who published in 2001 her study of lathering the back of female rats with normal sunscreens, with the active ingredients of normal sunscreens, which are the methoxycinnamate, the avo, and the oxybenzones. Those compounds, those are known as organic synthetic chemical compounds. I'm a chemist by training and also a PhD chemical engineer, as I mentioned. So these are words that we don't normally hear, but if you look at the back of the label of a sunscreen, you see active ingredients, you'll see those compounds. Mm-hmm. And those compounds are female mimicking hormones. They are estrogenic. But what they do is they interfere with the normal flow of urine, the normal flow of perspiration. And it was proven in a study that these also get into the blood plasma and into the urine. And the study was done by the Danes in Denmark. The Danes, I don't want to offend anybody, but the Danes can be a little overreactive sometimes. And what they did is they took all of the sunscreens off the shelves. And
that's pretty dramatic response. I mean, they took it seriously, obviously. And
they took it very seriously. They read the study. And of course, Switzerland's not that far from Denmark. They believe this woman who's a toxicologist. And they said, we're going to get rid of all the sunscreens. So what happened is the EU, because they're part of the European Union, said, no, you can't do that. So they went back on the shelves. But they commissioned the study, and the study showed what I just said, that the organic sunscreens, these female mimicking hormones, are getting into the blood plasma and into the urine. And then there was a follow-up study by a woman at Harvard at the School of Public Health saying, well, if it's a choice between the sunscreen and the cheeseburgers, I'll take the sunscreen, meaning that she thought cheeseburgers were more harmful to your health than sunscreen, which is sort of like comparing, apples and oranges. So I was like, well, that's not a very smart thing to say, but somebody probably paid her to do the study. So it was done. And then the cytoprotective part. So my view was always, hey, wait a minute. First of all, let's get rid of all the toxins. Let's get rid of these endocrine disruptors, which are disrupting the flow of toxins out of your body. By doing that alone, you're going to improve your immune system capability. If your immune system functions well in the presence of the sun, your body's going to be strengthened, at least working efficiently and normally, so that you don't have to worry about that. The next thing is, what about cytoprotective? So it turns out that aloe, but not powdered aloe that's reconstituted from water, but aloe barbadensis miller, which has in it cytoprotective agents, should be in the product. Because just putting aloe on your skin will protect your skin from DNA damage. Okay? And DNA damage eventually leads to aging, wrinkling, and potentially mutation, and mutations lead to skin cancer. That's how it works, right? That's the mechanism, okay? So cytoprotective was very important to me. Of course, vitamin C was developed by a guy in, of all places, Duke University, Dr. Parnell, back in the late 70s, figured out that if you put vitamin C in sunscreen, that's a free radical scavenger, and free radical scavengers will take care of some of the problems with skin damage. You want to minimize free radical, but of course, free radicals are created every second of the day on your skin if you're in the sun, because the sun's the biggest free radical generator on the planet. If no matter what it hits, whether it's photosynthesis with plants and animals or with us. Of course, animals don't have photosynthesis, but we need vitamin D. So anyway, so cytoprotective, I wanted to make sure we had cytoprotective compounds in our sunscreen, and most of the products that are out there don't. And then I wanted to make it immunoenhancing. Well, that's a long story, but long story short is a kinesiologist chiropractor that I'm still going to see and still working with 25 years later. His first client was a guy who really, really understood back in the late 80s and early 90s, understood already what aromatherapeutic value there was from things like frankincense and rosemary, essential oils, but specific essential oils. Believe it or not, lavender has estrogenic compounds in it. Shea butter does, as I mentioned. So we combined different things. We spent a day in his office trying to figure out what would strengthen in the presence of the sun, what would weaken in the presence of the sun. And we found by muscle testing that by using rosemary and frankincense together, that was a powerful combination. And not just any rosemary, not just any frankincense. The frankincense had to be a specific type of frankincense, which we use. So that combination, just breathing that alone, gives your body, your immune system, it strengthens it. It gives you, I don't know if you know about muscle testing, but muscle testing, basically your nose and your mouth are close to your brain, because your brain instantly knows if something's good, not good, or has no effect. So you're going to have one of those three effects when somebody does muscle testing on one of your extremities, either your arm or your leg. And by taking the rosemary and the frankincense, putting it into our product, 100 out of 100 people were strengthened. So
really? Oh, that's fascinating.
It's crazy, right? So not only so those three things, immunoenhancing, cytoprotective, non-endocrine disrupting, that was my goal, is make something that's that effective, that in the presence of the sun will allow you to do whatever you want for as long as you want without worrying about damaging your skin. Not an easy goal.
Yeah, no, that's a tall order for sure. That's a lot of detail right there. So 100 people applied the sunscreen that you had, included rosemary and frankincense essential oils.
Yes.
They received the muscle testing, and
yes,
their response was more positive than those who did not.
Right. And when you say a response, so what was happening was Dr. Schmidt was testing to see would their neuromuscular response be strengthened, weakened, or have no effect. And in all cases, all of them, without exception, 100 out of 100 were strengthened.
That's pretty good.
It was impressive. But we also, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
So what we also did, because I'm a scientist, right, is I don't know if I believe in all this muscle testing thing. I said, this is a little different, right? I personally have been helped by it from a health standpoint, but that doesn't mean that it's going to help everybody. It doesn't mean that it's the real deal. So what we did was I met another guy who actually is not affiliated with Duke, but he's in Durham, North Carolina, Dr. George Clark. Dr. George Clark invented and patented, I didn't patent it, someone else did, invented and patented luciferase enzyme, which fireflies use to light up. It's an enzyme that they create and use to essentially cause their light to go. Lightning bugs or fireflies, whatever you want to call them. So it turns out that he took that information, figured out how to make a bioassay. And from that bioassay, using luciferase, he could determine whether something was an endocrine disruptor at as low as 10 to the minus 16th. So bioassays will go that low. Chemical assays will only go to about 10 to the minus 9th, which is nano. 10 to the minus 16th, about as close to 0 as you can get. So they took my stuff and they compared it to everything else that was on the shelves at the time. And we published in the Journal of Toxicology in 2005. And what was interesting from that study is that all the ingredients, not only the actives, but the inactives, the parabens, the non-active ingredients, the things like even shea butter, silicone oil, the phthalates, which are plasticizers, all find their way in the sunscreen in a lot of cases. We took each one of those individual components and Dr. Schmidt muscle tested each one of those different components, and they all weakened. Then Dr. Clark ran his biological assay with the luciferase enzyme on it, and all of them showed endocrine disruptor activity. All of them. Even a Corning silicone oil that was specifically developed to be non-toxic.
Oh, wow.
So I had to get rid of all, go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So I had to get rid of all the garbage that was out there. I started out naive, as I told you. I started out naively thinking I can just ask people who make sunscreen for a living to take out all the garbage and make a good product for me. So I would tell them, this is what I want. Here's my list. And they would send me back stuff that had myristate in it, for example. Myristate is a compound that a lot of people use as an emulsifier and a plasticizer. It's an endocrine disruptor. And I remember talking to poor Jane Garcia. She was a formulator at Paul Mitchell Bakke Laboratories. They made all of Paul Mitchell's products. And I said, Jane, you can't do that to me. She said, why not? I said, it's too long a story, Jane. I'm just telling you, you can't do it. So I figured out that I was going to have to make this myself, because everyone who knows the sunscreen business uses off-the-shelf available items to make the product shelf stable. And like I said, I didn't know about any of this stuff, right? I had to learn this. I wasn't a formulating chemist. I was a physical materials science chemist, a polymer chemist. I learned polymer science. So formulating was not my field of expertise, but I mean, I had enough chemistry knowledge to know what I had to do. So the reason I'm telling you all this is because the relationship between this muscle testing and this biological assay was 1-to-1. So everything that I thought might be okay, if it muscle tested poor, or if it showed up in the biological assay, we knew that it was an endocrine disruptor. It was a female mimicking hormone, or it was toxic in some way. Now, I found that they were female mimicking hormones. So we published that in the Journal of Toxicology in 2005. I did not get to present the paper because I was working. And one of my colleagues who we combined to write the paper, there was 5 authors of the paper. One of them, what happened was they presented it in San Diego, which is where you and I met. They presented it in March of 2005. And after the talk was over, 2 guys from L'Oreal came up and said, we're sure glad you didn't have our product in there that was tested.
Oh, really?
That was the big comment to Jeff Gordon. Jeff Gordon is still a good friend of mine and works up in DC for NIH now, National Institute of Health. And Jeff was one of the 2 people that did the testing with Dr. Clark. Anyway, long story short, very, very important situation. So now, you know, muscle testing on sunscreens, I can tell you we're the only one that muscle tests positive that's been ever used. Now, this is another side to that is we were told, look, you got to put your stuff in tubes. We were using toddles. Toddles are halfway between a tube and a bottle. They're called toddles. Maybe I can get one while we're talking. And it turns out we went to a tube. And thank you. So this is a toddle. Okay, that's called a tottle. And you know what tubes look like, right? These are tubes. So the difference is that tubes are highly plasticized.
Mm-hmm.
And inside these tubes, normally they put phthalates,
Mm-hmm.
which are plasticizers. They're also female mimicking hormones.
Mm-hmm.
You've heard about BPA and phthalates, which are toxins, female mimicking hormones. BPA is bisphenol A, which is put in the polycarbonate. So they said, well, it's even in bicycle helmets. It's crazy, right? It makes polycarbonate. Polycarbonate's a big time plastic. You know it to look as a clear, hard plastic. So this product, the tottle, turns out is made from polyethylene. No phthalates, no plasticizers to speak of. This kind of tube is made out of PVC, polyvinyl chloride, lots of plasticizers. And of course, guess where most of the tubes are come from?
China.
You got it. You got it.
And
try getting one that isn't. Okay, try getting a tube that isn't. So we went to tubes, and this was our first try at tubes. And we have a chiropractor kinesiologist who actually I went to visit while we were together in San Diego. She's in Del Mar, so close to San Diego. And she's been selling our product for about 6 years now to her clients. And she does kinesiology and muscle testing, all of that. She called Dr. Schmidt. She said, Dr. Schmidt, something's wrong with the sunscreen. Dr. Schmidt says, I'll call Guerry. I don't know what's going on. He calls me. He says, Guerry, there's something wrong with the sunscreen. What's going on? I said, I didn't change the formula. I can't change the formula. If I change the formula, I have to go through a whole series of FDA testing again. Yeah, that's over $3,500. I'm going, I didn't do that. He says, I said, well, the only other thing that's different is the tube. He goes, send me the tube.
Oh my
I
goodness.
send him the tube muscle tests negatively.
Wow, this is a level that people I think really don't relate to or understand. I think muscle testing is still really out there for a lot of people. So this is really, really detailed. This is really interesting.
It's different.
It is different. It's not, a lot of people don't know that it exists. And
Right.
if they do find out, they think it's really woo-woo. But I mean, I've had muscle testing. My sister's had muscle testing. It's a really, really interesting process.
Well, I'll tell you one more story about that, and then we'll go to further, because there's a Joe and Terry Graydon. They run the People's Pharmacy. They're on National Public Radio. Their show is syndicated. I don't know if you get it everywhere, but they've been on for a long, long time. So it turns out they were really good friends with Dr. Schmidt and with Dr. Clark. In fact, Joe Graydon was Dr. Clark's tennis partner. So they all lived in Durham, North Carolina at the time. And I said, well, let's take them to lunch. I'll tell them what's going on. Dr. Schmidt and I went to lunch with them. He took somebody else's sunscreen, and he took our sunscreen, and he put it on Joe and Terry Graydon and did muscle testing on them right at lunchtime. After their mouths closed, plural, they said, well, we should do a show on this. Never happened. That's a long story too, but it's really convincing when you show it to other people and you're not just doing it in the privacy of a chiropractor or kinesiologist's office. And so anyway, so that's part of the story. The rest of the story, which is even probably more important in a way, is that by doing this, by making a food grade edible product only. So we say, if you don't put it in your mouth, why on earth would you put it on your skin? Skin's your biggest organ. If that's true, and I think everybody agrees, right?
Yeah.
So why would you put it in your mouth then?
Right.
So, you know, if you wouldn't put it in your mouth, and I don't think you should put it on your skin, that's bottom line for me. If it's a skin product, period, I forget about sunscreen for a minute. If it's any skin product, you should be able to read the label and say, you know what, I'd put that in my mouth, including zinc oxide, which, by the way, is a preservative for a lot of foods, right? Titanium dioxide is too. Titanium dioxide has some issues. Zinc oxide, none that I know of. So we said, okay. Excuse me. Yeah. So, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Get some water.
Yeah, I got to get some water. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
So, what I was going to say is that what wound up happening is because I was so diligent in making sure there were no toxins that by de facto, I had to develop something that was food grade edible. Meaning that it was, but as you know, there's some food grade edible stuff that's toxic, right? So this is like really, really different.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. There's all those different levels to it. Yeah.
Right. All these different levels to it
Can
because
you, but
everybody's,
should you? Yeah.
well, everybody talks about all natural, but nobody's defined what all natural is. And the Natural Products Association, of which I've been a member for 7 years now, they said to me 3 years ago, we're going to define all natural. And we're going to get the FDA to accept our definition. Well, that was 3 years ago. They haven't done it. And they said, oh, we're going to do it next year. Next year was 2016. So here it is, 2 years later, they haven't done it. And I don't think they're going to do it because nobody can agree on what all natural is. I say to people, okay, I know almond oil, most people consider that all natural, right? You squeeze an almond, you get oil. But there's no almond oil pools on the face of the planet. I've never found that, right? So even things that are all natural, somehow man gets involved in somehow doing something to it, whether it's hydrolysis to get the almond oil, or something much more complicated like extraction using solvents, hexane, that kind of thing. All of those can be all natural substances, but when you start working on them, there's all kinds of toxins that can occur. And those are chemical toxins that in a lot of cases are female mimicking hormone endocrine disruptors. Mm-hmm. So getting back to the point about food grade edible. So by making the product we make and making it food grade edible, there were some more requirements. And this is where it gets really a little bit crazy. Every other sunscreen on the planet, and I mean every other one, right, uses oil and water together. Every single one of them is essentially 70% water, because water's free, almost, relatively inexpensive. And maybe somewhere between 5 and 7% oils, maybe as much as 10% oils. So water and oil. Now, there's a big problem with water and oil. They don't mix. So to get them to mix and be stable, and that's a big thing. So think about salad dressing in the grocery store where you've got oil and vinegar. Well, vinegar is just acetic acid and water, okay? So oil and water don't mix. Oil and vinegar don't mix. What they do is they put an emulsifier in there to keep those two substances, which are very different, together. And all these emulsifiers, with almost no exception, all of them are toxic. Mm. Now, the good news is you don't need much of an emulsifier. And of course, the ones that don't use enough emulsifier, those are the salad dressings that separate very rapidly. You'll see Annie's and Newman's Own. Even those, they use some emulsifiers. Sometimes they don't. They use things like xanthan gum, which is not toxic. But there's very few non-toxic emulsifiers. Most of them that were used in sunscreens, all of them that were used in sunscreen, were emulsifiers that were toxic and endocrine disruptors. So I couldn't use that. So I had to figure out, first of all, what am I going to do there? Well, I decided, oil and water is one way to do it. The other way to do it is vegetable-based or plant-based glycerin. So glycerin can be from petroleum or it can be from plants. Obviously, I went with plants. Pharmaceutical grade. It was a pharmaceutical grade plant product that you can buy, which is actually USP grade, which is United States Pharmaceutical grade glycerin. So that's what we use. So no oil and water. Okay, so that problem goes away. 70% glycerin instead of 70% oil and water. Mm. That's one of the things. The second thing is, and I don't know if I mentioned to you that I was hired by Burt's Bees to be their SPF formulator.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, that happened. And that was because I had a patent on sunscreen in 2005 when they hired me to do this. And then in 2007, they got rid of me because they were sold out to Clorox. Okay.
Okay.
So I met, however, through that, I met the formulator for Burt's Bees, all of his products. One guy, one chemist, Chuck Friedman, who became my friend. And I got to use his lab to formulate zinc oxide the way I needed it formulated. So we found out that zinc oxide, when you put it in water, forms zinc hydroxide. So there's a big problem with that. Two big problems with that. One is zinc oxide is the stuff that the lifeguards put on their nose that blocks out all the UVB and most of the UVA. if you keep it zinc oxide, you have to keep the pH either above 9.5 or below 3. Yeah.
Really?
So when I found that out, then I had to decide, well, I'm not going to do lower than 3 because that's acidic. pH of 9.5 is very alkaline, but it's not caustic, and there's a big difference. pH of 10 is Drano, which is not only alkaline, but it's also caustic. In other words, you don't want that on your skin because it will chafe your skin. But that's not true if you chelate zinc oxide the way we do with amino acids. We use L-arginine to chelate our zinc oxide.
Wow. How long did that take you to figure out? That's intense.
That was intense, and that was after Burt's Bees said, well, your formulation's not very stable, so, we're not going to
figure this out. Yeah.
And I said, well, okay. Because, and here's why that happened. Because everybody's zinc oxide at that time was surface treated with silicone oil. And Burt's Bees said silicone oil is synthetic. We can't use that. Which was crazy because there's not enough silicone oil in that surface layer of zinc oxide to do anything. However, this is what people don't realize, is that even that zinc oxide, which is surface treated with silicone oil, even it has pinholes in it. So what happens with zinc oxide at a pH below 9.5 is it becomes zinc hydroxide, and zinc hydroxide is a salt. Well, guess what destroys emulsions more than anything else? Salt. So the more salt that's in your salad dressing, the faster it'll separate.
Interesting.
So that's, so if you look at salad dressings, I guarantee you the ones that have separated faster are the ones that have more salt in them. And you can read the back of salad dressing labels. There's, sometimes as much as 1,500 milligrams of salt in there. It's crazy. Right? That's another thing that Miradesi.
So they have to balance that out with those emulsifiers if they don't want it to separate as quickly. Interesting.
Right. And that's really hard to do because at some point.
Or they just have to let it separate.
Right. Because at some point what happens is you just, like for example, aloe's got tons of salt in it, but all different salts. So you can't get aloe really to emulsify with anything. It's really hard. And that's another long story, but I won't go into that now. But the point is, so now you understand we have glycerin, and we don't want to make zinc hydroxide. So by having glycerin, I could keep the pH where I needed it to be, because all the other sunscreens on the planet have a pH of somewhere between 5.5 and 7. And some people will tell you, oh, we have alkaline sunscreen. Well, yeah, maybe you have 7 or 7.1, but it's not really alkaline. 9.5 is real alkaline. Now, there's a big theory now that alkaline water, for example, and alkaline foods are much healthier for you. And it is true that this guy Warburg said that, and it's true, cancer cells can't grow in alkaline environments. Well, I like that because we have an alkaline environment. So cancer cells cannot grow in our sunscreen.
That's
really true.
So you have created, basically, just to kind of summarize this up for everybody, kind of just not make it as all these chemical terms that, even some of these are going over my head. But
science project.
No, it's intense, but that's important to know because it took a lot of intentionality to create. But to kind of summarize it, it's toxin free.
Right.
It will not disrupt your hormones, which we're getting from a lot of plastics and toxins in the air and all sorts of other things naturally anyway. So you don't want to choose that. So anything you have in your control. So this will not disrupt your hormones.
Correct.
It is not carcinogenic. It's actually skin protectant. It's made with glycerin as opposed to oil and water, and zinc is the main active ingredient. And you just explained how you created that to be healthier for your skin and the pH levels. And overall, how long would it last if you're like really active? Do you still need to be reapplying it every couple hours? How long does it last?
Well, I would never suggest that anyone doesn't reapply. So I would always suggest you reapply.
Okay.
I'm very active. The reason I made it is for surfing. And I get in the water a lot.
Okay.
So I put it on before I go in the water, at least 20 or 30 minutes before, because remember, it's in glycerin, not in water and oil. One thing about water and oil is water rapidly evaporates. So 70% of the product is susceptible to evaporating if you're using anybody else's product. Glycerin will not evaporate. So when you put my stuff on, it's on. And it's not going to evaporate. It's not going to evaporate when you're in the water. It's not going to evaporate when you're out of the water. However, it'll eventually wash off.
Sure.
It is very water resistant. And the chelated zinc oxide that we make, which with L-arginine chelate, that is very, very clingy to the skin. It's bioactive and bioavailable. Well, nobody else's zinc oxide is anywhere like that.
Okay.
So yes, you should reapply. And yes, you should see if it's on or not. And because it's in glycerin, it's not the same product that your parents put on you or you put on to your kids. It feels different. Glycerin is a little sticky.
Okay.
It's a little runny. And glycerin is very temperature dependent. When it's cold out, my stuff gets thick. And when it's hot out, my stuff is very, very runny.
This is my redhead husband that just came home from work.
How are you?
He said, "How are you?" He can't hear.
I'm Guerry. Nice to meet you. Yeah, he needs my stuff.
Yeah, I know.
can tell.
He's the creator of Third Rock Sunblock Sunscreen, and that's what we're talking about. Yeah. Cool. So I had one more question for you before we kind of wrap it up. You had mentioned the essential oils. Now I noticed that you have an aromatherapy sunscreen and a
unscented.
Yeah. So is the oil in both, or just the aromatherapy?
Well, the essential oils, rosemary and frankincense, are only in the aromatherapeutic.
Gotcha. Okay, and
which we call it. Yeah.
That's where you were saying there's a little bit even of an immune boost there. Is
yes.
That right? Okay.
Exactly. Aromatherapeutic immune boost. As soon as you smell it, it goes to your brain. Your brain says, "Hey, this is good stuff." Strengthens you in the presence of the sun, which is how you want to be. One thing I left out.
In the presence of the sun. So instead of just protecting you, it's turning you into a superhero.
It is. It is.
Sun exposure then becomes good, not bad.
Exactly. We were going to call it sun armor at one time because it really is sun armor, right?
I love that.
Somebody else took the name, and I was like, that's okay.
I did want to ask you, so how'd you come up with Third Rock Sunblock?
That was my daughter and I driving to the beach one day, and I'm trying to come up with a name besides sun armor. Nice. And my 13-year-old daughter at the time said, "Well, I guess it's okay." You have to meet her to know she doesn't get excited about very many things. So she said, "Yeah, at least it rhymes."
There you go. It does. I mean, it's very memorable. It's very easy to remember.
Well, and the other thing that was important is that it was all earth-grown ingredients. So that's why I was thinking Third Rock. Third Rock is the earth. All earth-grown ingredients. I'm like, keep it that way.
There you go.
Now, there's one other thing that we didn't talk about.
Oh, yes.
And that's UVA.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So the FDA has it way upside down. So I think everybody that's in your audience probably questions the AMA and the FDA and all these big organizations that protect us from Monsanto and blah, 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 right? I can tell you the FDA has got it completely upside down when it comes to SPF. So for your husband, I know for a fact that in 15 minutes or less in the presence of the sun, he's going to start turning pink. That means 15 minutes before, if there was 0 SPF, he would start getting somewhat of a burn. SPF 2 to 4, 2 is water, 4 is mineral oil that my generation women used to use to get a tan. So that's SPF 4. SPF 30 means 30 times 15 means 450 minutes before your husband starts to turn pink in the presence of the sun. Now, that's absurd for a lot of reasons. Well, first of all, 450 minutes is almost 8 hours of protection, right? 7 times 6 is 420, 8 times 6 is 480, right? So somewhere between 7 and 8 hours of protection. First of all, that doesn't happen because as soon as you put the sunscreen on your skin, the SPF value isn't 30 anymore. It decreases rapidly, and the sun actually breaks down most of the sunscreen very quickly. And remember, I told you 70% of it's water, so it evaporates. Okay, so you're basically using 10-cent an ounce stuff on your skin to protect you from something that's pretty important called skin cancer. Bad. Now, think about this for a minute. SPF is UVB only. UVB is not UVA. There's 2 main wavelengths of sunlight, UVB and UVA. UVB is the short 290 to 320 nanometer sunlight. that sunlight is being stopped or absorbed by the SPF actives that are in most sunscreens. The oxybenzones, the methoxycinnamates, the offshoots from caprylic acid. Those are all organic sunscreens. We talked about endocrine disruptors. They'll block out or absorb, and usually absorb, UVB, but they have nothing to do with UVA. Only zinc oxide, titanium dioxide, and avobenzone absorb or block UVA. Those are the only three. The only three that have been accepted by the FDA in the United States. Now in Europe, they have some others, but they're all organic too, and they're all female mimicking hormones.
So zinc blocks both UVA and UVB?
It does.
Okay.
Better than any other product on the planet that anybody knows of that they've used. And the guy who invented how to micronize zinc oxide and make it quote unquote clear made $1 billion from BASF. Oh yes. And he's doing very well. I met him. Nice guy. But he made a lot of money by making nano-sized particles of zinc oxide. There's another company, not BASF, Umicore, which then came with a non-nano zinc oxide, and they're making so much of it right now they can't keep it in stock because everybody knows zinc oxide's the best. However, what I told you is not zinc hydroxide, right? So remember, we're making zinc oxide that's stable, which is why our product stays stable forever. We don't have a 2-year shelf life. We have a 20-year shelf life, but we can't put that on our label because the FDA would never accept it.
Sure.
Anyway, getting back to UVA, UVB. So here's how bad it is. So you put whatever you think is good for your husband not to turn red, or your son, and they go outside and they don't turn pink. Well, that's good, right? But here's the problem. They're not turning pink because of UVB. It's not UVA that causes pinkness. If you start to turn red in the presence of the sun, if your husband or your son starts getting red, what do you tell them?
You're getting sunburned.
Right. Get out of the sun, right?
Yeah.
You're getting sunburned.
Right.
Doesn't matter if you have stuff on or not. You're still getting burned.
Right.
Right. But if you have stuff on, they're going to stay out longer and be more susceptible to it than if they don't turn pink. Here's how bad it is. Only UVB turns you pink, SPF. UVA has nothing to do with SPF. There's no measurement of UVA with SPF. UVA is measured by what they call the Boots rating, which came out of England, which gives you a star rating. And almost no sunscreens has an SPF 35 like we do, with a star rating of 5. The star rating is UVA. UVA is what causes DNA damage, aging, wrinkling, mutations, and eventually skin cancer, not UVB.
Wow.
UVB is what makes you turn red, which your body and your brain is telling you get out of the sun. So by putting toxins on, you're actually protecting yourself from turning pink and giving yourself a false sense of security. And therefore, the rates of skin cancer just keep going up, not only in the United States, Europe, Australia. Unbelievable, right?
Wow. Yeah. So you need the combo package.
You need the combo. And in 2011, the FDA, in their infinite wisdom, came up with a new monograph. The monograph was written in 1978. It took them 33 years to update it. And after that, in that 2011 monograph, they said, well, if you don't have UVB, UVA broad spectrum protection, you have to put a warning on the label that says you don't have it. You cannot put broad spectrum protection. They also said, and this is how much people aren't obeying the FDA, even in the sunscreen business. They also said you can't have anything that's more than SPF 50. Well, there are Neutrogena commercials that have been advertised over the last several months in the summer for SPF 100.
Yeah.
So the FDA is not really, they don't have the capabilities to enforce their own regulations, even in the sunscreen business. And of course, let's face it, people are dying from white pills, not from sunscreen. You're not going to die tomorrow. You know, you may die a couple of years from now.
Yeah, it's the delayed. Yeah, I'm not gonna die eating this hamburger, but it's affecting my health in the long run. Yeah.
Right. So that whole thing about UVA and UVB is tremendously different. And in my brochure, it shows there's a plot, which I can show you if I can get the brochure. That plot is extremely important, actually, and it shows. Do we have one of those? I just need the brochure. I'll just show you, because I don't know how much you're gonna edit this and all that, right? But yeah, thank you. Thank you. So there's a brochure, and I think I don't know if I gave that to you when we met or not.
Oh, you know what? I think I got one when it came in the mail.
So in the middle there's that plot. Can you see that?
Oh, yeah. I remember seeing that. Yep.
Yeah. So that green line is ours.
Mm-hmm.
And that green line that goes all the way across, that is pure zinc oxide, which is our product. So we basically took what the lifeguards put on their nose and we made a lotion into it. All the other stuff, the red line and the blue line, that's other people's mineral sunscreens. And you can see that in the UVA region, they don't give a lot of protection. Right. But, however, by FDA, they give some protection, so therefore they can still call it broad spectrum protection.
Interesting. That's how details is all in the details.
All the details.
That's so interesting. Well, it takes someone that's really passionate about it to bring something new to the market. So it's really awesome that you've put so much thought and time and energy into covering all of those bases, particularly when you can get away without having to do that. You don't necessarily have to do that. So it's really neat that you've done that, and it really separates it from the pack, which is pretty awesome.
Our stuff is $1 an ounce to make, and everybody else's is 10 cents an ounce. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it takes a lot more effort sometimes to do things in a detailed and specific and healthy way. That's for sure. Especially, the more popular it gets, hopefully, the less expensive. But that's true. It will cut the cost down eventually. But we'll never make it for the cost that the other guys are doing. Right. It'll never be there.
Speaking of, where can people go? Tell us where they can buy this.
Well, we don't have it in many stores. We really would prefer people to go to our website, which is www.3rdrockessentials.com, thirdrockessentials.com. That's really the best place. Okay. We ship next day as often as we can. Weekends
are people. I ordered it and I had it in like 2 days. It
awesome. Was we usually send it
without Amazon.
Yeah, without Amazon. Amazon takes 60% of our money, but Amazon does have it. And there are reviews on Amazon that go both ways. And I'll tell you that most people who don't like our stuff is because they don't read what's in the box about how to apply it or our story or why it's different. You have to expect that it will feel different on your skin.
Oh, I see. So if people don't like it, it's like a texture thing, typically.
Yes, and it will be sticky a little bit at the beginning, but once the glycerin soaks in, which takes more time than it does water and oil, you won't even know that it's any different. Yeah. And it'll be there, and it'll protect you. So if you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of the feel initially, then you're going to be protected. And for me, it takes a special person to, yes, exactly. The aesthetics are not oil and water. Yeah. And they never will be as long as we make it in glycerin, because glycerin has properties that are different. And just pure glycerin is very sticky. You wouldn't want to put that on. It's like putting molasses on your skin. You wouldn't want to do that. You don't want to do that? You don't want to do that, right? But a lot of women use our product as makeup underneath their makeup. Like a primer. As a base. A primer, yeah. Base or primer. A lot of women use that, especially in places, Vegas, Phoenix. Our product in the Southwest is extremely water absorbing. So glycerin is a humectant, means it brings water in. So in the place like a desert area, this stuff stays on forever. My wife swum with it all day in Vegas, never reapplied, because in the desert it's so dry that a little bit of moisture being pulled into your skin is a great thing. And remember, our stuff doesn't evaporate. So you put on a regular sunscreen in a place like Vegas or Phoenix, and 70% of it's gone probably within an hour. It just evaporates off your skin, even if it penetrates. And that's why they say, hey, well, you should put your sunscreen on 15 minutes before you go. Well, that's because they want you to get as much on your skin that you can. But water will still evaporate whether it gets into your pores or not. Yeah. So we don't have any of those issues, right? That's awesome. There is water. Don't get me wrong. There is water in our product, but that's because we chelate the zinc oxide into a dispersion of water. But there's very little water in our product, like maybe 5%. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing, Guerry. I'm excited to send the link to everybody and let them know about this this different opportunity that they have. You were kind enough to offer a discount code. So if people go to your website, thirdrockessentials.com, and purchase a sunscreen, you can enter Third Rock, 3RDROCK, as the discount code, and you'll get 20% off. So go do that. Get the 2-day shipping, basically next day shipping, before Labor Day, and enjoy your holiday with protected skin.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming on and sharing all of that wonderful information. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.